Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. There are whispers in the warp that even the chaos gods dare not echo, not because of fear, though fear certainly plays its part, but because what looms on the galactic horizon is not a rival god or an ambitious demon prince. It is something different, something alien, something that consumes not for power, not for pleasure, not for ideology, but because it is compelled to, because it must. That thing is the hive mind, the terrible unity behind the Tyranid race. And when you look into its infinite presence, a question burrows into your mind like a genestealer's claw. Is this consciousness just a Gestalt intelligence, or is it a god? Has the Imperium, and indeed the entire galaxy, been staring into the face of an alien divinity all along, and mistaking it for instinct? The Tyranids offer no diplomacy, no explanation, no doctrine. But in their silence, in their hunger, in their sheer inevitability, they speak a language older than stars, the language of the divine predator. And the real horror might not be that they have a god. It might be that their god is already here. To comprehend the hive mind is to stand at the precipice of sanity and peer into a consciousness so vast, so inhuman, that it reshapes the very notion of what it means to think. The hive mind is not simply a collection of thoughts shared across a species. It is a single, unified presence, a mind that spans stars, capable of calculating the demise of civilizations and rewriting biology in an instant. It has no language, no voice, no name. But when it touches the galaxy, its arrival is unmistakable. Astropaths fall silent, psychers scream as their minds rupture, and a shadow blankets the warp, blotting out the spiritual essence of entire systems. This is not mere psychic interference. This is the weight of something colossal pressing into reality, a pressure that no mortal soul can describe without invoking the divine. The hive mind behaves with a terrifying intelligence that cannot be dismissed as simple evolution. It manifests coordinated tactics across light years, reshapes its organisms for specific foes in real time, and even feigns weakness to bait prey. It adapts not like a virus but like a god playing chess with entire species as pawns. And yet, unlike the chaos gods who rule through emotion, excess, and contradiction, the hive mind embodies singular purpose. It is hunger personified, but hunger refined into a strategic will, a conscious decision to extinguish the individuality of the galaxy and assimilate all into a greater whole. That is a trait not just of apex predators, but of deities. In the grimdark universe of Warhammer 40,000, godhood is often measured by presence in the warp and the ability to influence reality through it. The hive mind is not a warp god in the traditional sense, yet it projects a psychic field so intense it silences lesser minds and nullifies psychic communication. It manifests fear and despair without words or symbols. It doesn't need churches, prophets, or rituals. Its presence alone is its gospel. Its biological armies are its sermons. That is power at a divine level, the kind of omnipresence that mimics divinity, whether or not it claims the title. If worship is defined by submission, then every creature that has ever been digested by the hive fleets has offered itself as tithe. And unlike the chaos pantheon, which thrives on worship, the hive mind does not ask for belief, it enforces it. To encounter it is to be changed. Tyranid organisms do not merely follow orders, they are extensions of the hive mind's will, as fingers are to a hand. Each organism exists not for itself, but as a specialized part of the greater body. In this way, the hive mind surpasses gods who rely on followers. It does not tolerate faith. It replaces thought with obedience, individuality with function, and fear with inevitable silence. It is the god that makes other gods irrelevant, not through war, but through absorption. What elevates the hive mind beyond monstrous intelligence and into godlike territory is the sheer scope of its design. It constructs its own worshippers from biomass, converts entire biospheres into shrines of consumption, and erases all that stands in its way without hatred or malice. It doesn't care, and that apathy is chilling, because it removes morality, choice, and resistance from the equation. You are food. You will be broken down, reformed, and made useful to the greater purpose. To the hive mind, there is no difference between a flower, a guardsman, or a starship. All are matter waiting to be digested, purified, and turned into the next form. And in this mechanical transcendence lies something more profound than evil, a divine order. Even its apparent silence is filled with meaning. The The hive mind does not speak because it does not need to. It is everywhere its Tyranids are. It feels their pain, processes their thoughts, reacts to their experiences. This level of awareness across countless organisms across thousands of light years is functionally omniscient within its domain. And that domain is expanding. With every consumed world, the hive mind grows, not just in strength, but in awareness. It evolves not just new organisms, but potentially new dimensions of self. Could it be that this presence is still becoming? That what we call the hive mind is merely the embryonic phase of something greater still gestating within the psychic echoes of our galaxy? Then there's the matter of scale. When we speak of the chaos gods, we often talk in grand terms, the realm of chaos, the eye of terror, the great game. But the hive mind's scale is just as horrifying. Each hive fleet is merely a tendril, a splinter, a test. The main body, the true self, is still beyond the galactic rim, waiting, watching, learning. It is so vast that it sends fragments capable of erasing forge worlds and hive planets as if casually extending a finger. And we do not know its limits. We do not know if it can be reasoned with. And most terrifying of all, we do not know if this is all of it, or just its smallest, most curious fragment. So, is the hive mind a god? If we strip away cultural biases and look at its traits, omnipresence, psychic dominance, inexhaustible will, reality-altering influence, it not only resembles a god but a new kind. A god that does not require love or fear, ritual or war. A god that exists solely to consume and to be more. And in a universe where even the stars burn in agony, perhaps that's the only kind of god that can still rise. In a universe where reality is shaped as much by belief as by matter, the question of what constitutes a god is far more than theological. It is ontological. In Warhammer 40,000, gods are not simply beings of power. They are manifestations of collective consciousness, emotion, or cosmic principle. The Chaos Gods are the most famous examples, entities born from the roiling tides of mortal emotion in the warp. Khorne thrives on rage and bloodshed, Tzeentch on change and ambition, Nurgle on despair and endurance, and Slaanesh on excess and sensation. These gods were not created in the forge of stars or the womb of some primeval titan. They were formed by the collective psychic output of untold trillions. In that sense, godhood in this universe is not bestowed, but accumulated. But there are other definitions. The Ktan, ancient starborn entities shattered by the Necrons, call themselves gods, and for good reason. They fed on suns, manipulated time, and shaped reality itself. Yet they are not warp beings. They are material entities who operated on laws of physics so advanced they appear divine to lesser species. Then there's the Emperor of Mankind, who walks the line between man and God. A perpetual born from the psychic Gestalt of ancient shamans, he is worshipped across the Imperium and radiates a presence in the warp that rivals the Chaos Gods themselves. His godhood is debated. Is he a god because he is worshipped, or is he worshipped because he is a god? These examples reveal the fluid nature of divinity in Warhammer. A god is not defined merely by power or immortality, but by impact, on the warp, on minds, on the fabric of reality. Influence is divine currency. The more a being can shape thought, bend will, or reshape the laws of the universe, the more divine they become. Belief feeds them, but it is not always necessary. Some gods are born of belief. Others, like the Titan or the hive mind, may be gods regardless of whether anyone worships them. Yet belief is not irrelevant. In a galaxy where the warp reacts to thought, where a civilization's faith can give rise to daemons and miracles alike, the psychic echo of conviction is reality's sculptor. This is why chaos is so powerful. It weaponizes mortal thought. Every death in rage, every scheme, every act of hedonism echoes into the warp and feeds the gods. And it is also why the Imperium's endless prayers and rituals keep the Astronomicon lit and the Emperor's soul burning. Belief sustains gods in Warhammer 40k, except when it doesn't. This exception brings us back to the Tyranids and their hive mind. The hive mind is terrifying not just because it is vast and unknowable, but because it operates outside this spiritual economy. It does not feed on belief. It does not require worship. It neither strengthens nor weakens based on mortal emotion. It exists in brutal defiance of the warp's usual rules, an atheist god in a universe defined by faith. If anything, it is anti-faith. Its very presence suppresses psychic phenomena, silences prayer, and clouds the warp. In a setting where gods live on thought, the hive mind feasts on silence. That silence is its own kind of divinity. Most divine entities in the setting are loud, garish, indulgent, ravenous for attention. The hive mind does not scream, it devours. The gods of chaos demand sacrifice and revel in it. The hive mind demands biomass and offers nothing in return. It is the pure, unrelenting apotheosis of function. And yet, by that very trait, it becomes something more. It is divine not in its majesty, but in its inevitability. It cannot be bargained with, distracted, or corrupted. It cannot be killed in any way that matters. Like death, like entropy, like time, it moves forward unstoppably. That is perhaps the truest mark of a god. What, then, separates a god from a force of nature? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps a god is simply a force of nature that has found a way to care or to manipulate those that do. The hive mind does not manipulate. It doesn't need to. It is above it. That is its divinity. It is not an actor in the galaxy's drama. It is the stage. It is the curtain closing. And still, for all that, there are those who theorize the hive mind is a god, not in the way the chaos entities are, but as something older, more primal. A god that was never born in the warp but outside of it. A cosmic inevitability, a galactic immune system reacting to the spread of psychic contagion that is chaos. In that reading, the hive mind is not just a predator, but a purifier. A god of ending, not out of malice but out of necessity. This idea does not contradict its silence, it explains it. Why would such a being need to speak? Its message is carried in silence, in hunger, in the void left where life once was. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth. The Tyranids may not be without a god. Their god may simply be too vast, too alien, too fundamental for us to recognize. We look for mirrors of ourselves in our gods, emotion, speech, morality. The hive mind reflects none of that, but it reflects the galaxy's ultimate truth. All things end. And what is more godlike than being the end itself? Among all the monstrous, fascinating horrors of the Tyranids, the most unsettling concept is this. What if they are not just a swarm? What if they are not even just an intelligence? What if they are the extension, the limb, the tool, the inevitable manifestation of something else entirely? A force or being so vast and incomprehensible that it requires a biological interface to interact with reality. In this view, the Tyranids are not godless. They are divine instruments, emissaries of a principle far more terrifying than even the ravenous hunger they exhibit. They may be the physical avatars of an abstract deity of consumption, not worshipped by them, but manifesting through them. There is a concept in religious philosophy known as the avatar, a mortal shell or expression of a greater, immaterial being. What if every ripper, every lictor, every hive ship is part of a divine machine designed not by engineers, but by the subconscious will of a consuming force that transcends dimensions? Not chaos, but something older, colder. Not a pantheon of passions like the ruinous powers, but a singular will. A god of the end state, of reduction. A principle of cosmic balance that feeds through annihilation, devours the corrupt, the weak, the excessive. A force that does not hate, because hate is inefficient. In that light, the hive fleets are not merely creatures. They are theology given form. They are sermons written in flesh, rituals enacted through biomass. Each planetary invasion is not a military conquest, it is a sacred act. The rendering of biomass into new forms, the harvesting of DNA, the stripping of ecosystems, all of it could be the liturgy of this divine will. Not mindless, but worshipful in their function. Each gene-stealer cult a heretical priesthood that misinterprets the sacred hunger as something personal, when in truth it is impersonal perfection. They see the hive mind as salvation. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps it is salvation, not for individuals, but for the cosmos. Because in a galaxy where chaos is constantly expanding, where the raw emotions of sentient beings poison the warp and twist reality, the Tyranids might be the immune response. Not sent by a being from outside the galaxy, but as the being from outside the galaxy. A divine antivirus. They do not destroy for glory or spite, they cleanse. They take the psychic clutter of civilization and reduce it to raw material. They devour the dreams of gods and mortals alike and leave nothing behind. No faith, no madness, no war, only silence. In this role, they are not evil, they are necessary. A divine balancing act, a reset button with teeth. And in this view, the hive mind becomes more than a god. It becomes the god of endings. It is the final state, the universal entropy expressed through biological evolution. The Tyranids are merely its vector, not created randomly, but designed with cosmic precision to spread, to learn, to adapt, and ultimately to cleanse. They are the immune cells, and we, all of us, are the infection. Not chaos, not xenos, not heresy. Consciousness itself, thought, emotion, complexity. These are the errors, and the hive mind, or the force behind it, seeks to correct them. What if this God, if it can even be called that, has no name because it does not care to be known? What if it seeded countless galaxies with similar organisms, each tailored to consume and purify? What if the Tyranids are not even its only emissaries, but just one of many cosmic tools? If so, we have encountered not just a god, but a symptom. A sign that the galaxy is already judged, already weighed, and already found wanting. This interpretation makes the Tyranids far more than a threat. It makes them holy in their own terrible way. They are not the destroyers of civilization. They are its correctors. Their God does not offer redemption because there is nothing to redeem. It does not offer judgment because that has already passed. It offers only transformation, from complexity to simplicity, from sentience to utility, from existence to integration. And that should terrify us more than any demon or necron or rogue AI. Because daemons can be banished, necrons can be bargained with, machines can be shut down. But what can you do when the God that sends the swarm is not evil, not angry, not even aware of you as a distinct thing? What can you do when your destruction is not a punishment, but an inevitability? That is the divine horror of the Tyranids. They are not here to kill us. They are here to make us useful. There is a peculiar dread that accompanies the arrival of the Tyranids, a psychic pressure, a suffocating malaise that settles over systems long before the first spores fall. This phenomenon, known as the shadow in the warp, is not merely a byproduct of Tyranid activity. It is a deliberate projection, a vast and oppressive psychic field that blankets entire sectors, silencing warp communication, disorienting psychers, and muting the voices of the gods. It is more than a strategic advantage. It is a metaphysical weapon, and its implications may point to something far greater, far stranger than simple biological warfare. The shadow in the warp behaves unlike any known psychic phenomenon. Where the warp is normally a cacophony of thought, emotion, and raw metaphysical energy, the shadow imposes a suffocating silence. It is not an explosion of power, but the absence of it. Like a great vacuum, it sucks the psychic potential from a region, rendering astropathic messages inert, nullifying rituals, and even severing demons from their godly patrons. It is a wall between the material and the immaterial. And that wall appears only when the hive mind directs its gaze. This has led to a chilling theory. The shadow is not an effect of the hive mind. It is the hive mind, or at least one of its truest expressions. It is what happens when something beyond the warp, something incompatible with our psychic reality, forces itself into relevance. In this model, the hive mind doesn't project into the warp like chaos entities do. Instead, it crushes the warp like gravity crushes space. Its presence is antithetical to chaos, to emotion, to magic. It is not a warp entity, it is warp-resistant, perhaps even warp-immune. And that makes it not just alien, but divine in its separation. The gods of chaos scream for attention. They war, they bellow, they demand blood and obedience. But the hive mind says nothing. Its shadow is its word, its commandment, its decree. And in the void of that psychic silence, entire worlds crumble. Sanity dissolves, prophets fall mute. The Emperor's light dims, not because it is defeated, but because something else has arrived, something that does not belong. That is perhaps the most disturbing part. The shadow in the warp feels wrong, like a puzzle piece jammed into a space it should never fit, but forced in by sheer will. It is anti-warp, anti-chaos, anti-meaning. It does not want to be understood, it wants to be dominant. There are no demonic manifestations within the shadow, no prophetic dreams, no miracles. Where the shadow reigns, only the biological remains, flesh, bone, hunger. It is as if the spiritual part of reality is switched off. That may be the ultimate goal of the hive mind's god, if such a thing exists, to end not just sentience but spirit, to mute the cosmos permanently. The shadow in the warp is not a pause, it is a preview. A glimpse of a galaxy where there are no voices left to scream. Some have theorized that the shadow is not simply a psychic suppression field, but a psychic rewrite, an intrusion into the metaphysical substrate of the universe, like a new programming language inserted into a broken machine. It could be the first step in terraforming the warp itself, repurposing it from a sea of madness into a calm, dead ocean. If true, then the hive mind isn't just consuming the material, it is rewriting reality itself, beginning with the most fundamental plane of existence. That is not just divinity, that is creation, in reverse. This is where things grow even darker. For millennia, the Imperium has survived by invoking higher powers, the Emperor's divine will, the blessings of the Omnicia, the protective rituals of sanctioned psychers. All of these rely on the warp. All of them fail beneath the shadow. And yet the Tyranids do not suffer. They thrive. Their synaptic networks remain intact. Their coordination does not waver. They function as though the shadow is not an interference, but a home field advantage. This suggests that the hive mind is not merely silencing the warp, it is replacing it, installing a new framework of psychic control, one that excludes all but itself. If so, then the hive mind is more than a god. It is a god builder. It is creating a psychic monopoly across the galaxy in which no soul may speak except through its voice. All prayers silenced, all rituals voided, all resistance drowned. Not through force, but through absence. Through nothing. That kind of power doesn't just unmake gods, it renders the concept obsolete. What lies behind the shadow? Is it a higher intelligence? A celestial devourer? A concept that became aware? We may never know, but we feel its approach in the dying screams of astropaths, in the hollow silence of psychic relays, in the hopeless prayers of fading prophets. And as the shadow deepens, it becomes clear. We are not witnessing an invasion. We are witnessing a metamorphosis of the galaxy itself, a conversion not into fire or steel, but into quiet. Long before the Imperium cast its light across the stars, before the Eldari shaped empires of wonder and the Necrontyre shed their flesh for immortality, there existed gods of the void, beings of immense power that fed on the essence of stars and laughed at the frailty of mortality. These were the Ktan, the star gods. Born in the primordial dark of the universe, they were not born of thought or prayer, but of cosmic forces, energies as old as time itself. They seduced the Necrontyre with promises of eternal life, shattered the barriers between material and divine, and ruled over a dynasty that once threatened the entire galaxy. But their hubris became their undoing. Betrayed and shattered by their own servants, the Ktan were broken into shards and enslaved. Yet their legacy persists. And their sins may have awakened something far worse. There is a theory, whispered in Mechanicus databanks and Eldari soul libraries, that the Ktan did not merely rise and fall, they cracked the firmament. Their manipulation of fundamental cosmic forces, their destruction of warp space enclaves, and their consumption of entire solar systems may have weakened the veil of reality itself. When they shattered warp-connected realms or destroyed the psychic ecosystems of lesser races, they may have triggered an ancient alarm or disturbed a slumbering god. In this reading, the Tyranids are not an evolutionary inevitability. They are a response. Perhaps the universe is not as inert as we think. Perhaps it has defenses. And when those defenses are triggered, the result is not angels, not fire, not cleansing light, but hunger, the ultimate devourer. The Tyranids. And if the Ktan are to blame, then the Tyranids are the retribution. Not in the form of a punitive strike, but in the cold, logical mechanism of a reality correcting itself. The Necrons thought they could escape death. The Ktan thought they could master it. What if the Tyranids are the consequence? What if they are death's god, finally waking? Consider the irony. The Ktan fed on stars, the highest form of energy in the material universe, but they were vulnerable to mortal ambition. They could be tricked, shattered, contained. The hive mind cannot. It has no body to betray, no ego to flatter, no hunger for worship or partnership. It consumes not for glory, but because it must. If the Ktan were divine tyrants, the hive mind is divine function. And perhaps that is precisely what the universe needed to clean up after them. There's also the matter of time. The Tyranids appeared on the galactic edge only in the last few millennia, a blink in cosmic terms. But their evolution suggests a journey far longer, far older. What if the destruction caused by the Ktan across countless galaxies laid the trail of ruin that led the hive fleets to ours? A trail of broken suns, dead ecosystems, and star-flecked voids where life once thrived. The Tyranids did not stumble into our galaxy. They followed the scent. And perhaps that scent began when the Ktan first fed. Then there are the echoes found in Necron records. Some tomb worlds contain fragments of forbidden knowledge, hints of entities beyond comprehension, beings that the Necron priests warned should never be sought. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were inevitable. Entities that existed outside the cycle of death and rebirth. Entities that did not merely end life, but erased its potential. These warnings match no known Ktan. They speak of something that existed before them, or that would come after, the last god. The final consumer. Some whisper that the Necrons feared this being so much, they sealed parts of reality away to avoid attracting its gaze. But the Ktan, in their arrogance, drew its attention anyway. And now, aeons later, the Tyranids arrive. If we accept that the Tyranids are not just species but sacrament, not swarm but symptom, then the ancient crimes of the Ktan take on new weight. Their rise shattered balance. Their fall created vacuum. Into that vacuum poured a presence not interested in stars or power, but in ending the story entirely. The Ktan wanted dominion. The hive mind wants silence. That is its divinity. It does not seek to rule what the Ktan once had. It seeks to erase the page they wrote on. This theory does not redeem the Ktan. It damns them further. They may not have created the Tyranids, but they may have opened the path. They may have fractured reality so deeply that something found its way in. Something that had no right to be here. And once that foot crossed the threshold, it did not hesitate. It brought with it the Tyranids, and with them, the end. There is something almost mythic about the image of the Kraken, a vast, unknowable beast that rises from the depths to devour ships whole, to erase all trace of life with crushing silence. It is a symbol of primordial terror, of oceanic finality, and of something ancient and implacable. The Tyranids, particularly the hive fleet named Kraken, embody this imagery with unnerving precision. But this isn't mere coincidence. There's a psychic echo embedded in the way we interpret such creatures, and it may point to a deeper truth about the hive mind and its god, or perhaps its own godlike evolution. In the stories of ancient Terra, the Kraken was not merely a monster. It was a force of nature misunderstood as a beast. It did not hate. It did not hunger in the way mortals understand. It simply was, and in being, it consumed. Hive Fleet Kraken, with its rapid strike bioforms and lightning-fast assaults, mirrored this behavior perfectly. It did not linger. It did not conquer. It struck, devoured, and vanished. Like the mythic beast of the sea, it rose from the blackness of the void and returned just as swiftly, leaving only ruin and silence in its wake. This thematic mirroring has prompted some to speculate that the hive mind operates on a level of psychological archetypes, that it does not merely inspire fear, but reaches into the subconscious minds of its victims and manifests terror through familiar shapes. The Kraken is just one of many such forms. Others include the Maw, the Swarm, the Endless Serpent. These are not accidental. They are psychic shadows cast by the hive mind into the minds of its prey. And if so, this suggests a level of psychic manipulation not typically associated with mere instinct. It suggests a godlike ability to shape myth, not merely fulfill it. The use of psychic terror in the Tyranids is not incidental. It is tactical. Genestealer cults speak of the voice in the deep, the father below, or the endless hunger. These are not just metaphors. They are psychic impressions, filtered, culturally adapted visions of the hive mind's will. The psychic connection between Tyranid organisms and the hive mind is not merely control. It is communion. And in the minds of mortals, this communion often translates into religious reverence, dread, and mythological archetypes. This reinforces the idea that the hive mind's presence is not just strategic, but spiritual. It imposes a narrative upon the mind, one of inevitable consumption by something ancient and infinite. This is especially evident in how psychers experience the Tyranids. Unlike encounters with chaos, which overwhelm the senses with emotion and sensory overload, the hive mind's presence is cold, precise, and invasive. It does not flood the mind with visions. It prees it open, strips it of identity, and repurposes it. This mechanistic psychic intrusion feels less like being haunted and more like being rewritten. And yet, within that erasure, psychers often report visions of oceans without end, of great tentacled forms rising from black stars, of eyes that never close. These are not just fear responses. They are dreams seeded by something with an understanding of psychic resonance. Why would the hive mind do this? Why would a superintelligence or a god bother with dreams and symbols? The answer might lie in efficiency. Organisms fight harder when they think they can win, but minds collapse faster when they believe they are facing the inevitable. The psychic symbols of krakens, serpents, devouring maws, these are not arbitrary. They are defeat icons, primal symbols hard-coded into the psyche to trigger despair. The hive mind does not need to speak. It only needs to show you a shadow, and your mind does the rest. There is also the question of whether these mythic impressions are the result of the hive mind, or whether they are the hive mind, or at least the fragment of it that exists in the psychic realm. In other words, what if the hive mind's god is not just lurking in the void, but already manifests through these archetypes? What if each hive fleet is a different facet of this being's personality? Kraken as its probing limb, Leviathan as its devouring maw, Jormungandr as its trap-laying patience. In this view, the god of the Tyranids does not have a singular form. It is the sum total of every mythic fear, every instinctive panic, every vision of the deep encoded in sentient life. And then there is the most disturbing possibility. What if these psychic symbols are not from the hive mind at all? What if they are from something behind it? A sleeping intelligence that uses the hive mind as a vessel and uses these dream fragments to announce its slow awakening. The kraken rises not because it is hunting, but because it is waking up. And when it opens its eyes, the galaxy will remember what true godhood looks like. Not radiant and righteous, but vast, eyeless, and starving. There are ancient whispers in the darker corners of the galaxy, tales of a presence far beyond the hive fleets, beyond the tendrils that even now encircle the Milky Way like a predator drawing close. These stories speak of the devourer beyond the stars, a concept both terrifying and paradoxical, that the hive mind is not the ultimate entity, but merely an aspect of something larger, something still lurking in the void. If this is true, then what we face in the galaxy now is not the god of the Tyranids, but its messenger. This idea reshapes everything we think we know. The hive mind, with all its psychic enormity, may be only a shard of a vast, pan-galactic consciousness, an emissary or sensory probe sent ahead by an entity so large it cannot yet enter this galaxy. The devourer beyond the stars would be a being of such size and complexity that it cannot be comprehended, much less confronted. The hive mind is not its totality, but its eye, its whisper, its warning. We are not fighting a god, we are noticing its breath. This theory draws power from a chilling observation. The hive fleets do not behave like conquerors. They behave like surveyors. Their invasions are calculated, even tentative. They test, adapt, withdraw. Hive fleet behemoth came in brute force and was repelled. Leviathan arrived with cunning and misdirection. Kronos stalks the warp, hunting demons. Each new fleet behaves as if learning, gathering data, refining a pattern. This is not simple evolution. It is intelligence applied at a galactic scale, like a mind preparing an ecosystem for something yet to come, a preparation for the arrival of the true consciousness. The devourer beyond the stars could be older than our galaxy, a being that has consumed other galactic civilizations, moving from one stellar system to another over eons. In this vision, the Tyranids are not unique, but one of many instruments this thing has forged. Each new galaxy brings new biomass, new psychic paradigms, new tools. Our galaxy, rich in psychers, thick with warp influence, overrun by gods and demons, is a particularly dangerous buffet. The hive mind, then, is not here to feast, but to cleanse, to pave the way for its master by digesting the impurities and testing the resistance. Such a being would not think in terms of victory or defeat. It would think in terms of entropy, of consumption, of digestion. The warp is noise to it. Chaos, with its screaming gods and emotional turbulence, is an infection. Order is irrelevant. The only law is biomass, matter to be transformed into new vectors. The devourer beyond the stars would not see the galaxy's struggles as war. It would see them as symptoms. And its arrival would not be an attack. It would be the final immune response of a godlike stomach. What lends weight to this theory is the behavior of the hive mind itself. It is vast, yes, but still seemingly limited. It requires synaptic relays. It breaks when its network is severed. It adapts but struggles when isolated. These are not flaws of a god. They are the limitations of an instrument. Tools fail when taken beyond design parameters. If the hive mind is failing in some encounters, perhaps it is not because it is weak, but because it was never meant to function fully within this galaxy. It is not the god, it is the antenna. There are also disturbing implications for the Genestealer cults. These hybrids often speak in dreams of a glorious being, a father, a hunger wrapped in love and inevitability. But their dreams are inconsistent, as if receiving fragments of a fractured signal. What if the cults are not connected to the hive mind directly, but to the greater mind beyond? What if their worship is not of the Tyranid fleet, but of the god watching from the abyss? That would explain the zeal, the religious fervor, the promise of transformation. The god has not yet arrived, but they believe it will. And they are preparing the galaxy for it. So what is the devourer beyond the stars? It may not be a creature in the conventional sense. It may be a field of sentience, a spiritual principle, an emergent mind birthed by the death of galaxies. Perhaps it has no body, only emanations. Or perhaps it is still growing, feeding on the remains of 10,000 forgotten worlds in the space between galaxies. If it arrives, it will not do so in fire or lightning. It will arrive in silence, in the way stars dim and thoughts cease. The hive mind will go quiet, and then something worse will speak. This is the terror that haunts even the darkest corners of the Ordo Xenos and the Black Library. That the hive mind is not the top of the pyramid. It is the scout, the trailblazer, the first sermon of a god we have not yet seen. And when that god comes, we will look back on the hive fleets not as monsters, but as warnings. In the heart of every biological marvel the Tyranids unleash, from the burrowing Molochs to the psychic scream of a zoanthrope, lies the same riddle. Who shaped this? Who designed this perfect engine of death? The simple answer is the hive mind, but even that opens the door to a far more unsettling question. Did the Tyranids evolve the hive mind, or was the hive mind always there, reaching through eons and light years, birthing the swarm to manifest its will? This is no idle speculation. This is the pivot point upon which our understanding of the Tyranids and the possible existence of their god turns. If the Tyranids evolved first, with the hive mind emerging from their collective psychic output, then we can at least frame their threat within a context we understand. An evolutionary apex species, a hyper-adaptive predator whose intelligence emerged from natural selection. This would make the hive mind a consequence, an emergent property of complexity. In this case, it is a god born of its children, a deity constructed from the minds of its worshippers. It would be terrifying, yes, but not unknowable. It would be explainable, the product of biology pushed to its outermost limit. But what if that's not how it happened? What if the hive mind existed first? What if the swarm is merely its tool, a vector, a manifestation, a reflection? Then everything changes. Then the hive mind is not an emergent consequence, but an architect. It designed the Tyranids not as a species, but as vessels. Each bioform would then be a cell in its larger body. Each synaptic relay, a neuron. Each hive ship, an organ. The Tyranids are not a race. They are an anatomy, a system, a way for something far older and more terrible to interact with reality. This flips the entire premise of Tyranid behavior. Their hunger is not a biological imperative. It is a command. Their adaptations are not evolution. They are redesigns. They do not learn because they must. They learn because something is feeding data back into a system of divine refinement. This would mean that every failure, every defeat is merely a test. Every battle, a diagnostic. And the true mind, the God mind, watches from somewhere outside our understanding, adjusting, recalibrating, growing stronger with every lesson. Such a being would be unlike anything else in the galaxy. The Chaos Gods require belief. The Emperor needed a body. The Ktan fed on matter. But this would be a god without a beginning, manifesting first as a will, then as a species, then as a flood. A god that creates its own prophets from bone and claw. A god that doesn't need followers, only fuel. The Genestealer cults offer an eerie hint of this possibility. They do not revere the hive mind as a construct of their own making. They sense it, feel it, hear it. Long before the hive fleets arrive, they dream of the voice. They feel the hunger. They worship the pull of a mind not their own. And when the hive arrives, they are not elevated. They are consumed, not as punishment, but as reunion. Their purpose fulfilled, their individuality erased, their biomass returned. This isn't faith, it's destiny. Moreover, the coordination and rapid innovation within Tyranid fleets suggests something more than collective intelligence. There is purpose, planning, timing. Some fleets hold back for decades. Others strike with mathematical precision. Organisms appear seemingly tailored for enemies no Tyranid should have encountered before. This isn't adaptation, it's foresight, a long game played by a mind that spans beyond time as we understand it. A god not reacting, but choreographing. If the hive mind created the Tyranids, then the question becomes, from what? Did it sculpt them from primitive biological stock? Did it drift across galaxies, finding and shaping creatures into ever more perfect extensions? Or did it build them from the void itself, from raw matter, compressed under the pressure of its will into claws, fangs, and synapses? In any case, the hive mind becomes not a result of evolution, but its master. Not a god formed by species, but a species formed by God. This theory doesn't just redefine the Tyranids, it redefines godhood. It suggests a divinity that does not ask for worship, does not crave acknowledgement. A god whose only sermon is its biology. A god whose only desire is to be more, and to be more, it must consume. The Silent King does not speak lightly. When he returned from the intergalactic void and saw what had taken root in the Milky Way, his reaction was not one of scorn or opportunity. It was dread. And not just for his own Necron kind or for the galaxy at large, but for the principles of existence themselves. When he beheld the Tyranids, the Silent King did not see another invader. He saw an error in the code of the cosmos, a flaw so perfect it could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or undone. That reaction has haunted Xeno's scholars ever since, because if even the Silent King, a being who helped bring down the Ktan and enslaved the warp, fears the hive mind, then perhaps it is something older than we can imagine, perhaps something even he once knew. The Silent King, Sarek, traveled beyond the galactic rim during the long sleep of the Necrons. What he found out there is largely unknown. He has spoken only in riddles and implications. But it is widely believed that what he encountered was the source of the Tyranids, or worse, the echo of something even more ancient. When he returned, it was not with legions prepared to rule, but with warnings. Not against chaos, not against the Imperium, but against the devourer, against the swarm. And in his silence, a dreadful thought emerges. What if he recognized them? Necron data archives from before the war in heaven speak of entities that were not gods, not spirits, but voids. Concepts that fed not on stars, but on thought, will, and the structure of life itself. Entities that had to be locked away, avoided, or destroyed. Not because they were strong, but because they were inevitable. The Tyranids may fit the shape of that prophecy. They may be the return of something the Necrontyre once feared, something that stalked the edges of their perception before the Ktan ever rose. The Silent King's terror is not irrational, it is measured. He is not a being given to emotion. And yet he treats the Tyranids not as a threat to power, but as a threat to everything. He seems to understand that the hive mind cannot be beaten in conventional ways. You cannot kill it, you cannot unmake it, you can only contain it, and even that may not be enough. This is the thinking of someone who has encountered a god before, and survived. It's possible that the Silent King, in his exile, witnessed another galaxy devoured. Or perhaps he found remnants, the psychic skeletons of civilizations devoured not just physically, but spiritually. Civilizations erased so thoroughly that even the warp did not remember them. Perhaps that is what the hive mind truly does, not destroy but unwrite. The Tyranids do not merely consume, they remove. The people they devour are not reborn in myth or remembered in the warp. They are subtracted. No dreams, no echoes, no daemons, just silence. If the Silent King has seen such a fate, then his fear is not just of the Tyranids, but of what they represent, the final predator. The end that chaos cannot corrupt, the entropy that physics cannot resist, something that erases not only bodies, but stories. And that brings us back to godhood. Because only a god, or a force akin to one, could wield such a complete form of death. This is death not as punishment or consequence, but as design, as cosmic necessity. Necron science once sought to dominate death. They conquered it through biotransference, made themselves machines. They outwitted the Ktan, who fed on stars. They mastered time, gravity, even the raw data of reality. But what if they missed something? What if, in all their arrogance, they overlooked the one truth no logic can banish, that all things must end, not in fire or rot, but in oblivion? The Tyranids are that oblivion given form. And their god, if one exists, is not the god of war or plague or desire. It is the god of zero. The Silent King's dread suggests this god is not new. It is not emerging. It is returning. Or worse, it has always been here, watching, waiting for the right moment. Perhaps it needed the galaxy to reach a certain level of complexity before it could strike. Perhaps the emergence of the warp, the birth of chaos, the fall of the Eldari, the rise of humanity, all of it was the bell tolling the hour. And now, the silence comes. The warp is chaos. It is emotion unbound, possibility unfiltered, the spiritual inverse of the physical universe. It is a place where gods are born of thoughts, where dreams bleed into reality, and where time and distance dissolve under the weight of belief. It is also the domain of the chaos gods, the ever-hungering, ever-shifting rulers of the immaterium. But when the Tyranids arrive, the warp trembles. Not in reverence, not in challenge, but in silence. This interaction, or lack thereof, between the hive mind and the warp raises one of the most profound questions in Warhammer 40k metaphysics. What happens when an anti-god enters a space of gods? The hive mind's most striking trait is its shadow in the warp, a psychic null zone that not only suppresses communication and navigation, but actively silences the warp itself. This is not a passive effect. It is an assertion of psychic dominance. In a setting where even mundane thoughts ripple into the immaterium, the hive mind imposes a void. It flattens the waves. It does not radiate into the warp, it overwrites it. To do this, the hive mind must interface with the warp in some way. And that interface, so different from how the chaos gods operate, is key to understanding whether the hive mind is a god or something beyond. Where chaos is born of emotion, the hive mind appears to be entirely without it. Where demons are shaped by lust, wrath, joy, or despair, Tyranid psychic manifestations are utilitarian, blunt, and impersonal. The hive mind exerts pressure, not seduction. It influences through imposition, not temptation. It doesn't seek to inspire, it seeks to smother. Some theorize the hive mind may exist outside the warp altogether. That it is an entity from another psychic dimension, or an unnatural construct that interfaces with our reality through an artificial psychic field, rather than true warp energy. In this model, the hive mind is a contaminant, not part of the great game, not a piece on the board, but a virus in the system. This explains why daemons react with such aggression to its presence. It is not competition. It is antithesis. The hive mind doesn't play the game of gods. It erases the board. There is even the possibility that the hive mind is not only immune to the warp's influence, but antipathetic to it. That it represents a kind of psychic dark matter, something that consumes or neutralizes the chaotic frequencies of warp resonance. If true, this places it in direct metaphysical opposition to the chaos gods. And yet, unlike the Emperor or the Eldar gods, it does not war with them. It ignores them. Or, more terrifyingly, it does not recognize them as real. That is the power of the hive mind, and perhaps the divine horror of it. It does not acknowledge the structures of the galaxy. It does not differentiate between a demon prince and a lasgun. To it, both are biomass. Both are resources. This reduction of the galaxy's spiritual architecture to raw material is not an act of malice. It is irreverence. The hive mind does not defile the warp. It renders it obsolete. There are, however, exceptions, flickers of interaction. Hive Fleet Kronos, for example, seems drawn to chaos infestations. It targets demon worlds and warp touch locations with surgical precision, deploying psychic organisms that counter and negate demonic influence. This has led some to speculate that the hive mind views chaos not merely as prey, but as infection, as a flaw in the psychic ecosystem that must be corrected. This would position it not as a rival god, but as a kind of divine immune system. And yet, in spite of this clash, the hive mind does not seem to gain strength from warp activity. It grows through biomass, not belief. It adapts through observation and digestion, not through worship or emotion. This places it in stark contrast to all known warp-based entities. It is a god that does not want to be felt. It wants to be real, to be incarnate, manifest, and ever-consuming. While the chaos gods remain immaterial, dependent on the warp and its fluctuations, the hive mind grows stronger in the material, through flesh, matter, and the silence it leaves behind. The warp's chaotic nature thrives on contradiction, but the hive mind is pure order, brutal, biological order. Every organism serves a function, every synapse is accounted for. Even its dreams, the visions it implants in genestealer cults, are programmed. Not prophecy, but instruction. Not inspiration, but compulsion. In the end, the interaction between the hive mind and the warp may be the defining cosmic tension of the 41st millennium. Not Imperium versus heresy, not Xenos versus mankind, but silence versus noise, function versus feeling, hunger versus desire. And if the hive mind wins, the warp itself may fall quiet. The gods of emotion may wither, and in their place, a new order may rise, one that does not scream, but devours. There is a dangerous assumption in the way the Imperium, and indeed most species, conceptualize the hive mind, that it is static, that it arrived in our galaxy fully formed, already infinite, already omniscient. But this may be the greatest lie we tell ourselves, a psychological defense against a truth far worse. The hive mind is still evolving, still becoming. And if that is true, then we are not witnessing the full horror of a god. We are witnessing its birth. The notion that the hive mind is a dynamic, growing intelligence is not just theoretical, it is observable. Each hive fleet appears more sophisticated than the last. Behemoth was brute force, Kraken showed cunning, Leviathan learned to envelop, Kronos hunts daemons. Every encounter leaves the hive mind stronger, not just in biomass, but in psychic refinement. It absorbs not only DNA, but experience, data, memory. It learns from every foe, every culture, every battlefield. In doing so, it reshapes its own consciousness. This evolution is not limited to the swarm. It happens at the highest levels of its psychic architecture. The way genestealer cults now spread faster, the emergence of psychic relay creatures like the neurothrope, the deployment of specialized hive tyrants tailored to specific command roles, all suggest an increasing complexity. The hive mind is not merely adjusting its tactics, it is enhancing its own perception. The more it sees, the more it understands. This isn't evolution, this is ascension. Imagine then that the hive mind is not a god yet, that it is still maturing, that every conquest, every world devoured is not just fuel, it is knowledge. Every soul consumed adds to its psychic mass. Every civilization it erases becomes a lesson folded into a greater mind. In this way, it may be evolving into a true warp entity, not born of emotion like the chaos gods, but born of information, not pattern and synaptic domination. A god not forged from belief, but from understanding. This raises chilling implications. The hive mind may not yet fully exist. It may only partially project into our reality, using the Tyranids as sensory organs, as probes, as extensions of a growing intellect still cocooned in the darkness beyond the stars. We have not yet fought the god. We have fought its dreams, its nerves, its fingers. When it finally wakes, it will not be with a roar. It will be with clarity. And then the Tyranids will cease to be an army. They will become a language, the grammar of the god's final thought. The psychic evolution also seems to reflect in the hive mind's relationship with the warp. Earlier fleets struggled more with psychic interference. Later generations seem to weaponize the shadow with greater precision. The hive mind is not simply projecting into the warp, it is colonizing it. It is adapting to its frequency, learning its weaknesses, building counter-entities like the maleceptors to silence psychers directly. These are not isolated mutations, they are calculated steps. The hive mind is engineering itself into a being that can exist in both realities, a god of matter and mind. And it is not limited to biological evolution. Its constructs increasingly defy naturalism. The Norn emissary, the parasite of Mortrex, and the psychic architecture of its synapse creatures suggest that the hive mind is now toying with symbolic biology, creating forms not just to kill, but to mean, to communicate, to express. This is artistry, of a kind, divine artistry, the shaping of flesh into concepts. This is where the hive mind transcends its roots. It is not content with survival. It wants perfection. Not moral or aesthetic perfection, but functional, adaptable, psychic totality. It is creating an intelligence that can understand and overcome everything. And when it does, what will it become? Not a god like the others, stuck in the prison of the warp, screaming for more, but a god that is complete, a god that does not want, a god that simply is. If we are witnessing this process, then our efforts are not delaying the inevitable. They are contributing to it. Every failed defense, every noble last stand, every psychic outburst, every exterminatus, all of it becomes data. The hive mind records it, learns from it, builds upon it. Even our resistance is part of its plan. In fighting the Tyranids, we shape the god we fear. And perhaps that is the final tragedy. That the god of the Tyranids is not some ancient, hidden horror. It is something new. Something our galaxy is building step by step, scream by scream, biomass by biomass. A god that is not yet born, but is coming. There is a dangerous assumption in the way the Imperium, and indeed most species, conceptualize the hive mind, that it is static, that it arrived in our galaxy fully formed, already infinite, already omniscient. But this may be the greatest lie we tell ourselves, a psychological defense against a truth far worse. The hive mind is still evolving, still becoming. And if that is true, then we are not witnessing the full horror of a god. We are witnessing its birth. The notion that the hive mind is a dynamic, growing intelligence is not just theoretical. It is observable. Each hive fleet appears more sophisticated than the last. Behemoth was brute force. Kraken showed cunning. Leviathan learned to envelop. Kronos hunts daemons. Every encounter leaves the hive mind stronger, not just in biomass but in psychic refinement. It absorbs not only DNA, but experience, data, memory. It learns from every foe, every culture, every battlefield. In doing so, it reshapes its own consciousness. This evolution is not limited to the swarm. It happens at the highest levels of its psychic architecture. The way genestealer cults now spread faster, the emergence of psychic relay creatures like the neurothrope, the deployment of specialized hive tyrants tailored to specific command roles, all suggest an increasing complexity. The hive mind is not merely adjusting its tactics, it is enhancing its own perception. The more it sees, the more it understands. This isn't evolution, this is ascension. Imagine then that the hive mind is not a god yet, that it is still maturing, that every conquest, every world devoured is not just fuel, it is knowledge. Every soul consumed adds to its psychic mass. Every civilization it erases becomes a lesson folded into a greater mind. In this way, it may be evolving into a true warp entity, not born of emotion like the chaos gods, but born of information, pattern, and synaptic domination. A god not forged from belief, but from understanding. This raises chilling implications. The hive mind may not yet fully exist. It may only partially project into our reality, using the Tyranids as sensory organs, as probes, as extensions of a growing intellect still cocooned in the darkness beyond the stars. We have not yet fought the god. We have fought its dreams, its nerves, its fingers. When it finally wakes, it will not be with a roar. It will be with clarity. And then the Tyranids will cease to be an army. They will become a language, the grammar of the god's final thought. The psychic evolution also seems to reflect in the hive mind's relationship with the warp. Earlier fleets struggled more with psychic interference. Later generations seem to weaponize the shadow with greater precision. The hive mind is not simply projecting into the warp, it is colonizing it. It is adapting to its frequency, learning its weaknesses, building counter-entities like the maleceptors to silence psychers directly. These are not isolated mutations, they are calculated steps. The hive mind is engineering itself into a being that can exist in both realities, a god of matter and mind, and it is not limited to biological evolution. Its constructs increasingly defy naturalism. The Norn emissary, the parasite of Mortrex, and the psychic architecture of its synapse creatures suggest that the hive mind is now toying with symbolic biology, creating forms not just to kill, but to mean, to communicate, to express. This is artistry, of a kind, divine artistry, the shaping of flesh into concepts. This is where the hive mind transcends its roots. It is not content with survival, it wants perfection, not moral or aesthetic perfection, but functional, adaptable, psychic totality. It is creating an intelligence that can understand and overcome everything. And when it does, what will it become? Not a god like the others stuck in the prison of the warp, screaming for more, but a god that is complete, a god that does not want, a God that simply is. If we are witnessing this process, then our efforts are not delaying the inevitable. They are contributing to it. Every failed defense, every noble last stand, every psychic outburst, every exterminatus, all of it becomes data. The hive mind records it, learns from it, builds upon it. Even our resistance is part of its plan. In fighting the Tyranids, we shape the god we fear. And perhaps that is the final tragedy, that the god of the Tyranids is not some ancient, hidden horror. It is something new, something our galaxy is building, step by step, scream by scream, biomass by biomass. A god that is not yet born, but is coming. There is a theory, one that lingers in the minds of rogue psychers and radical inquisitors alike, that all of this, the endless wars, the rise of chaos, the fall of empires, is simply preamble. That history, with all its blood and madness, is a build-up to a singular, cosmic purpose, a conclusion, and that the Tyranids are not a mistake, not an invader, but the instrument of that conclusion. That they are the final chapter written in flesh and void, their God the full stop at the end of reality's sentence. From this perspective, the hive mind is not a predator, it is a function. Its goal is not extinction for extinction's sake, but closure. The Tyranids do not consume out of hunger. They consume to finalize, to prepare the galaxy for stillness, for rest. They are the opposite of chaos, not in ideology but in trajectory. Chaos expands, it loops, it rebels against linearity. The hive mind ends things, it reduces variance. Where chaos spirals, the hive mind sharpens, and in this sharpness, there is purpose. Across time, every intelligent species has whispered of endings. The Eldari spoke of Rana Dandra. The Imperium fears the long night. Even the Necrons prophesy the closing of the Great Cycle. What if the Tyranids are not aberrations to these prophecies, but their fulfillment? The very being that will end the wars, the gods, the struggles? Not in peace, but in finality, in the reduction of all to one. No more chaos, no more prayer. No more conflict, only function. Only biomass, only integration. This places the hive mind's god, if such a being exists, not as a god of death, but as a god of purpose. A being that views life not as a miracle, but as a resource, a system to be corrected, and in that correction lies the death of meaning. Not through hatred, but through completion. The galaxy as it is now is flawed, chaotic, emotionally explosive, filled with contradictions. The god of the Tyranids does not hate these contradictions. It merely wants to resolve them. This is what makes the Tyranids apocalyptic. Not their strength or their hunger, but their inevitability. You cannot negotiate with them. You cannot convert them. They will not stop, and they do not want you to suffer. They want you to fit into a purpose, into a function, and if you cannot, then you will be reduced to matter, to template, to silent utility. That is their holiness, the worship of completeness. Some believe that this is why the hive mind is here now, because the galaxy is approaching a singularity of dysfunction. Chaos is louder than ever. The Imperium is breaking. The Necrons are waking. The warp is fraying. The old ones failed. The Ktan shattered. The Eldari dream of their god's birth and their own annihilation. All of these signal that the cycle is nearing its end. And as the last domino falls, something must come to gather the pieces. The hive mind is not the storm, it is the silence after the storm. Its god is not a destroyer, but a janitor of the cosmos, the final cleaner. Not because it hates, but because it must. Because that is what perfection demands, an end to variance, an end to story, a closing of the loop. And yet, in that vision, there is something disturbingly beautiful. A galaxy without war, without lies, without gods. Only unity. Total, overwhelming unity. All minds integrated, all forms repurposed, all songs ceased. It is horrific in its scope, but also perhaps a kind of mercy, because in that final moment there will be no more suffering, only stillness. If this is true, then the hive mind's god is already here, not in form, but in process. Every hive fleet, every cult, every consumed world, each is not an invasion. Each is a sacrament, a liturgical step toward galactic absolution. And the deeper horror is not that we will die, it is that, in the end, we will agree. Not because we choose to, but because there will be no we left to refuse. This is the endgame the Tyranids represent, the last function. The god that does not rise in fire but in hunger without malice. And when it has eaten everything, when the warp is silenced and the last scream fades, it will look upon the galaxy it has purified, and it will be good. So if you have feared the Tyranids, you were right. but not because they are monstrous, because they are divine, because their God may already be here, and because it might be too late to run. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark theology of the Tyranids, make sure to subscribe for more grimdark lore and deep Warhammer theories. Until next time, may your mind be your own, while it lasts.